Nope, not true. Not even close. Who doesn't love a good love story? It's the cornerstone of most art. Think about movies and the classics and Shakespeare. Everywhere you're going to see love stories. And myths and misinformation have been repeated and repeated so many times. And the problem is that we believe things that are just straight up wrong. So today we're going to look at the 3 most ridiculous lies about relationships, specifically about emotional intimacy. And these are the myths that just refuse to die. I am going to tell you each lie, then I'm going to tell you the truth, and then I'm going to give you proof for the truth. And then finally, I'm going to leave you with an action-oriented takeaway. My name is Laura Silverstein. I'm certified Gottman couples therapist and author of Love is an Action Verb. And over the last 30 years, I've been helping thousands of couples build healthy, happy, emotionally close relationships. And now I do the same thing on YouTube. Most people want to feel close in their primary romantic relationship, and they often complain that they no longer feel as close as they used to. And the first myth that I'm going to talk about makes this even harder. And that's the lie that men don't care about emotional intimacy. People say things as if they're facts, like everyone knows that women are more emotional than men, or he's a man, so he's only going to think about one thing, right? And it's kind of assumed. And it's tremendously disrespectful to men and sexist. And I don't think it's doing anybody any favors to keep this myth alive. Okay? It's not true. Here's the truth. All human beings need emotional connection with other humans. Men, women, people who identify as non-binary. Everyone needs to feel loved. We're socialized in a world where masculinity and femininity are oversimplified, and these generalizations and stereotypes are passed down through the stereotypes. So, of course, there are gender differences. I'm not going to say that there aren't, but they're not biological. In other words, no matter what your genitalia is, you need to feel close to another human being. So you might have differences about how you like to feel close and how you experience emotional connection, but the need for closeness is universal. We know from the research of John Bowlby that humans are biologically wired for attachment as a survival mechanism. And although that starts out for infants in terms of staying alive, this core need is not outgrown in adulthood, and it's not gender dependent. So, of course, men want to feel loved and connected. So that was the lie, the truth, and the proof. Now, here's your tip. Try to just stop talking about gender norms when it comes to love. It doesn't help you. It's going to be much easier to emotionally connect when you talk about your specific need for connection and not using words like men like this and women like this. Talk about, I like this, what do you like? And that's your takeaway message. All right, moving on. Now, this next one takes on a totally different tone, and in fact, is driven by romance and optimism. It's the happily ever after myth. So I know that you are smart enough not to just believe the Disney fairy tale ending. So I'm not condescending you here. The reason that I know this happily ever after myth still exists is because I've been in the world for a while, and I read the paper and I watch the news, and I even watch some reality TV because I'm interested in it psychologically. And love stories are always about finding love or love ending in some dramatic way. It is never just about a normal Tuesday afternoon. And the myth that we tend to believe is that as long as we have love, that intimacy is just naturally going to happen and we don't have to work at it. The truth of the matter is that love and intimacy are not actually the same thing. And it's 100% normal for emotional intimacy to fade in a relationship just because couples are busy, because they have a lot of obligations on their plate and they get distracted. In a brand new relationship, emotional intimacy is usually pretty strong because people are taking risks and they're putting a lot of energy into maintaining the relationship. And then the love develops, and the love can still stay super solid, but the emotional intimacy can fade if people aren't in the regular habit of turning toward each other and making an active effort to stay close. Emotional intimacy is built slowly and steadily, but it also fades slowly and steadily, which is why it's not a good reality TV show. Okay, so here's the proof of why we know that this is true. When John Gottman was looking at relationship stability, he learned that there was a thing that he calls turning toward, which was a core sense of building emotional intimacy. And what turning toward is, it's when couples take the time to reach out to their partners during the day and make what he calls bids for connection, which is just super simple, reaching out to somebody and sending them a text to say, hey, hope you're having a good day. Good luck with your presentation. I know you were nervous about it. It's bringing somebody a cup of coffee and you know that they like 1 sugar and 2 milks, right? So maybe you've heard the concept of putting money in the emotional bank account. That's what that is. It's taking care of your relationship so that you have that prevention step where you're staying close, and he calls it small things often. So the takeaway message for you, for your homework, is to reach out to your partner 10% more than you did yesterday. And when your partner reaches out to you, try to receive that bid. So that means if somebody's offering you a hug, slow down, take the hug, receive it, and then move on in your day. It doesn't take that long. It could be anything like, what are you reading? It could be showing an interest in something that somebody's passionate about, even if you're not passionate about it. That's how emotional intimacy is built. Okay, now we're moving on to myth number 3. Okay, the third myth is that when people hear the word emotional intimacy, they often picture a whole lot of crying. They think about sharing childhood traumas, and it can be a part of emotional intimacy to be vulnerable about your pain, but that's not the only way to get there. There are so many different ways to feel emotionally close. And if you overshare too quickly, you might feel worse. You might be doing that because you think that's what you're supposed to do to have emotional intimacy. So instead of oversharing, what we recommend as couples therapists is to slowly but surely connect in ways that feel mutually agreeable, fun, and bonding to both of you. It will require a certain amount of vulnerability, but not what we call a deep sea dive, which is where you just like put yourself out there without any safety rails, okay? And we know this to be true because the other thing we learned from Gottman's research is that there's a 20-to-1 positive to negative ratio. So people who are happy and feel close and secure in their relationships aren't necessarily always talking about awful negative things. They're talking about a lot of positive stuff, fun, enjoyable things, giving each other compliments, having humor, having play. Those are the things that build connection. And the deeper, unpleasant things will also build connection, but you don't need as many. You need 10% of those and 90% of the other stuff, okay? So your takeaway message is to talk to your partner and find out how do they feel about what helps them feel close. And I recommend starting out as asking a question before you jump in and try to do any problem solving, because all you're doing is gathering information and to see where there might be overlap and to learn some new things about your partner that you might not know. Okay? So myth number 4 is that many people believe that decreased intimacy means they're falling out of love. And that is absolutely not true. As I said before, love is not the same as intimacy. And decreased intimacy is a very, very normal and predictable thing that happens in a relationship over the course of time. All relationships ebb and flow. You're going to have mountains and valleys. So if you are in a valley and you think, oh my gosh, this means I need to kick this person to the curb, then you are doing yourself a disservice, as opposed to, oh, we're in a valley. Maybe we should just kind of go to a retreat together, spice things up a little bit, go on a date, and pull things back together. So if you believe it's the worst case scenario, then you're going to have two problems. You have the original, very normal, predictable problem, and then you have the other problem, which is that you might be pulling away instead of turning toward, like we talked about in myth number 3. The proof that I personally have about this is that part of my assessment process is when I'm meeting a new couple, I ask them about their best times and their hardest times. And I've never, ever met a couple that hasn't had a moment of feeling less connected than they used to. Okay, so the action-oriented step, you probably are already anticipating what I'm going to say, and that is to not pathologize a normal ebb and flow of a relationship. Try not to Google anything that talks about toxic signs or red flags that you're with the wrong person. All of those things are going to focus in on the negativity and not the big picture of all the good stuff and the bad stuff that all human relationships go through. So your homework is to look for strengths instead of challenges. Okay? All right. Now, myth number 5 is that people think that physical intimacy and emotional intimacy are completely separate. And this is absolutely not true. In reality, physical and emotional intimacy are interconnected because of the mind-body connection. If you believe that those two things are separate, that physical intimacy and emotional intimacy are each in their own sort of silo, then what happens is you get polarized. And if one person's love language is more physical touch and the other one is more sharing emotions, then what happens is you're in competition about intimacy instead of each feeling the generosity to try to give your partner what they need to feel close so that you'll then feel closer. And both of those things will build on each other, and eventually you'll see the connection. There's lots and lots of data to support that the physical intimacy and emotional intimacy are interconnected. I actually am planning a video, so depending on when you're seeing this, you'll see a link to a video that I'm currently planning where I poll a bunch of therapists and I'm asking them about this connection of physical and emotional intimacy and whether or not there might be gender differences. So super exciting results that I'm getting from that. So I will keep you posted when that's out. But here's your take-home message about the physical and emotional intimacy. I want you to share some physical touch with your partner and just notice how you feel, okay? And I'm not talking about sexual touch. I'm just talking about, like, say, you're holding a hand, and just notice what happens inside of you when you pay attention to really receiving that person is holding your hand and you're holding their hand, to notice what emotion may come up. And then you'll learn for yourself what is your connection with physical and emotional intimacy. And it's a good thing to then talk to your partner about. So today we only scratched the surface, and these 5 little action tips are only going to bring you so far. You need to go a little bit deeper if you really, really want that deep emotional long-term connection for a healthy long-term relationship. Take a look at How to Build Emotional Intimacy, where I take a much deeper dive with the advice about what to actually do. So I hope you find that useful. Thanks for watching.